Joined by David Diehl, I am John Schmeelk. As we take a look at the edge rushers that are coming out in the 2021 NFL Draft. And Dave, this is a group that has a lot of interesting prospects, no necessarily any sure things like you had with Chase Youngs, the Bosa's, and players like that in the past.
No, I mean, this is a group that where you're seeing now pretty much all the edge rushers and defensive ends you see starting to slowly triculate into the 11s, the teens, and later into this draft because it's so heavy right now with the quarterbacks and wide receivers and offensive weapons in front of the draft. You know, this is an area of my expertise, playing offensive tackle in the NFL. This was something that I did throughout my entire career, breaking down pass rush moves and breaking down the run game and ways to attack these players. And it's an exciting time to see these developmental players that are going to excel at the next level. And you hear a lot of names. I'm going to go in order. Aziz Ojulari. I think that he is the best defensive end coming out of the draft right now. When you lead the SEC in tackles for a loss, sacks, and forced fumbles, and you are going up against competitive offensive tackles that are going to be drafted and are going to be playing in the NFL, it says a lot about your makeup and the speed that you bring to that game.
All I see on tape from him is that swipe, that rip, and that shoulder dip, man, all day long getting around that edge.
And that's exactly where I was going to. His first step and get off remind me of Oweh. That ability to jump and get off on the snap and get that first step. He's already on the shoulders of offensive tackles, and he has the ability with his flexibility and his lateral movement to really dip and bend that edge. He does a great job of using that speed. You don't see him like other players bouncing around and overrunning it. Because of his size, you can move him around the defensive line on opposite sides. The one area where I think he has so much speed that he relies on it too much, that he does have to get that secondary pass rush move, and he can start working more that speed because he gets offensive tackles so far back and on their heels and start converting it into power and then flatten out. Like I said, when he does that, if he can flatten out the pressures and the amount of movement that he's going to get in the pocket for the quarterback to get off of the spot is something that I think intrigues all NFL defensive line coaches as we sit here and watch. Jaelan Phillips, I think he's a smooth pass rusher with obviously tremendous upside. He can bend, run the hoop on the edge, great hand usage. You see the arm over, he'll dip and swim because he's 6'5" and has the size to do it. He's a player that does convert speed to power. He can stack and shed at the point of attack. His backside pursuit is A++. You see him run plays down, and that's one reason why he has the 15.5 tackles for a loss in 2020. His motor is constantly going, and not many players can run it down on the backside. Whenever we played the Dallas Cowboys and DeMarcus Ware, okay, where's 94? Because you can't have a tight end on him, you can't have a running back on him, and you can't leave him unblocked on the backside because he'll run it down. Jaelan Phillips brings that to his game. He's got to play with more consistent leverage because he is 6'5". He's got to play with his pads lower. He's got to set up his secondary pass rush move more and work to the inside. That's something that he can do much better in this game. Another area of concern for him is the injuries. A lot of concussions at UCLA and his time at Miami. He's broken his hand. He's had wrist surgery. He's had hand surgery. And I know as an offensive tackle, that defensive end's putting his hands out there. I'm chopping, I'm swatting, I'm looking to grab, I'm looking to get him off of my body. And that's something that you have to worry about and consider. But my favorite that I love watching on film, Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye is an absolute beast when you watch him. His power, you see those elbows always in tight, shooting him inside. He's explosive out of his stance. You see him able to either penetrate and jump a gap or read a play to the backside and being able to force it to the other way. Plays with a lot of natural leverage. You always see him placing his hands where he can control an offensive tackle and really work that edge and not expose his body because he is a smaller guy. Once again, with all defensive ends, diversity in his pass rushing moves, kind of countering things. You know, when he gets bogged down and he goes for that power move and then initially gets stopped, he almost gets bogged down and it's like wasted movement. He's got to come up with that secondary movement to continue to add pressure. And he struggled versus the zone read. Instead of anticipating, there's a lot of hesitation and allowed some balls either to jump outside or to bounce to the inside gap for an extra 2-3 yards. But I love his makeup. I love what he brings to the game and his athleticism. And I think he's going to be one of those key players. Later in the rounds where I'm thinking like maybe third round, where I think that there's a player that can be had there that not only fits a 4-3, but fits a 3-4, Rashad Weaver out of Pitt. I absolutely love him. Plays heavy-handed, powerful at the point of attack, plays with balance. His feet are always underneath him, so he's not off. Huge strength, size, and length, so that he's not only at 6'4", 260, where he's playing defensive end. You can move him into the 3 technique. You can find ways to create mismatches for him to where he can get that pressure on the quarterback. He's got to play with more consistent leverage and jumped inside when he should contain. Sometimes he'll see a gap and he wants to get excited and make a play. He'll go to jump inside and the ball gets bounced outside instead of maintaining gap control. That's something that comes with more experience and just understanding of what his role is and not trying to do too much in the defense.
Dave, 2 guys I want to ask you about. Jason Oweh is an interesting player because he tested just off the charts at his pro day. Like, for a guy that's 260 pounds to run a sub 4.4 is just not, you can't even think about how ridiculous that is. But he had 0 sacks last year, which is just an amazing number. When you look at a guy like that, when I watched him, I thought he was just trying to win off the edge all day. He really didn't have any moves per se, which makes sense. He didn't start playing football till I think his junior year in high school. He was a basketball player. So just your thoughts on a guy like Oweh, when you look at him, how much of a project is he, and when would be a good time to roll the dice on a guy like that?
See, I know a lot of people get so infatuated with the speed, the size, the strength, 6'5", 257, 4'3", 740, 39.5-inch vert, 21 reps of 225. Absolutely explosive first step, disruptive, freak athlete, tremendous length at the point of attack. You know, he has a swipe move. He'll swipe hands. He'll chop and rip through. I'm sure that you love my demonstration.
Oh, they're great. I love it.
He'll chop and rip through. He has inside and outside moves. He'll do a good job of setting up an offensive tackle, thinking he's going to work wide and jump inside. But as you said, 8 career starts in college. And speed to power is something that we have not seen him do in college, to be able to convert that, which is such an added benefit for you if you are a speed rusher, because then you have an offensive tackle worried, okay, he can beat me on the edge, but he also beat me with power as well. I think that right now, with as intriguing as it is, he's not a polished product. And if you're really looking to get a player like him and give him the tremendous upside, it's going to take techniques and fundamentals and coaching, and it's going to take some pitch count here. It's not like he's going to be an every down defensive end for you. It's got to be, make sure that it's situational, whether it's a 3rd down, whether it's a 2-minute drill. Those are great things to have on your team and on your defensive end, but not in the first round if you're going to reach and grab him right away immediately.
Now, here's another guy, is Gregory Rousseau. He does not have a ton of starts. He opted out in 2020, but he had 15.5 sacks as a sophomore. He was another guy that did not play defensive end until he got to college. He was a wide receiver who had like 6'5" and 260 pounds. I mean, just my goodness gracious. And a lot of people, Dave, has said they remind him physically of JPP, coming out with his long arms. But if you look at his testing, but more importantly, look at his tape, I don't see the same athletic burst that we saw with JPP. As a guy that had to block him in practice, your thoughts on that comparison and on Rousseau generally?
Yeah, because he's a long strider. He's not as explosive as JPP was. You know, he's got great length to keep separation. He's got room to grow. He's 266. He's got that 6'6" frame. He still has 8 weight that he can add on to it. He's got active hands. And where he was most effective in his college game were when they were running stuts, where he was running TEs, ETs, scraping off of blitzing linebackers. He was able to cover tight ends down the seam and running back and wheel routes, but that wasn't his specialty. Obviously, that was something that was added on to it. But for me, I'm not sold on him because he doesn't consistently rush with leverage and bend on the outside. Sometimes get those shoulders up, exposes his body and his numbers, and gets controlled with that first initial snatch by an offensive tackle. His base and length, leg strength to anchor and balance. Once he gets through a hole, or when he's trying to get through to another part while working inside moves, sometimes he doesn't keep his base and his feet get too closed. It allows an offensive tackle, even though they're beat, to restart and redirect his rush because he doesn't have his feet underneath him. Once again, 1-year starter. This is a player, as you said, hasn't played a lot of football. He went into Miami. He sat out this year. I honestly believe sitting with those players that have somewhat of that same grade, whether it's first, second round grades, I honestly think Carlos Basham and Joe Tryon would be better and a more of a fit to fit the NFL game than Rousseau would.
Okay, so you just mentioned a couple second-round options for the Giants, Dave. You don't have to go into full detail on all of them, but who are some of the names of guys if the Giants don't go edge at 11, because to your point, not sure the value of those top three guys match at 11, right? If they want to wait until the second round, who are the guys that you would keep an eye on if you're a Giant fan? And do you agree with, by the way, that maybe 11 would be too rich for the guys at the top of this class?
I do. I think 11 is a little too rich for the guys right now in the class. I think that this is something where you can get value in the second round and even possibly in the third round based upon this is an area where there is depth at the edge position where it's completely different when we're talking about nose tackles and defensive tackles. So I do think you can wait. And for me, like I said, I love Carlos Basham out of Wake Forest's film. I have him at a second, third round grade. Very athletic for his size, 6'3", 274. He's another player, ran a 4.86, but he looks faster on film than 4.86. Understands how to use space and to create leverage. That's something that he does very well. He knows how to get an offensive tackle wide. He knows how to get him inside, and he's very slippery with his pass rush moves in order to do it. He works the edge, works inside. Good hands, but not great hands. That's an area where he needs to improve. Needs to be able to shock more and be able to stun offensive tackles to get their feet to stop, to work that secondary move. And he may not be as fluid as, Oweh or any of these other guys, but man, he has some creativity and can really get after the passer. So I think that in the second or third round, he may be one of those players that can be sneaky good for the New York Giants organization.
Folks, remember, he might have played offensive tackle, but he spent his whole career studying edge rushers and how to beat them. So listen to what David Diehl has to say when it comes to the edge class. Dave, we appreciate the time as always, my friend.
Thank you very much, Johnny.
Stay tuned as we continue to cover the 2021 NFL Draft on Giants.com and all the Giants digital platforms.